Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Dailies, where we look at the happenings from the front page of our Nigerian newspaper. Part of the story we will be looking at this morning is the new age policy, talking about the age that is attainable for you to write WAEC as well as to get admission into the tertiary institution. We know that that of the tertiary institution actually brought in some mixed feelings, where the Ministry of Education said they will be waiving it for this year, but from next year, henceforth, the new age for WAEC as well as tertiary institution will be 18 years and above. I'm Sarah Elisha Dasham, and I'll be doing the program alongside Rachel Tansy. Good morning.
Good morning, Sarah.
All right, we will be running through the papers, starting with the Guardian newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, economic recovery amid inflation and deficit concerns. Details can be found on page 6. Alongside, we have an infographic where we can see the largest economies and then that of Nigeria. And then we can look at the top 10 largest economies in the world and their GDP per capita as at of this month, August 2024, starting with the USA with 28.8 trillion naira. GDP per capita is $85,000. And then we have China with 18.5 trillion naira. The GDP per capita, we are looking at 131,000. And then we billion dollar, and then we have the GDP per capita as 54,000, and then we have Japan 4.1 trillion. GDP per capita is 33,000. India $33.9 trillion. GDP per capita is $2,700. The UK is having $3.5 trillion, and then the GDP per capita is 51,000. And then France, $3.1 trillion. GDP per capita is $47,000 rather. And Brazil is $2.3 trillion dollar, and then the GDP per capita is 11,000 US dollar. Italy $2.3 trillion, and then we have $39,600 dollar per capita. And then we have Canada with $2.2 trillion dollar, with the GDP per capita as 54,900. Looking at this top largest economy, despite Canada having just 2.2 trillion, we can see that the GDP per capita is high compared to other countries. Now coming to Nigeria, based on IMF estimates, Nigeria's GDP in US dollar declined from $477 billion in 2022 to $375 billion in 2023. It is estimated to drop to $253 billion in 2024. With continued devaluation of the local currency, Nigeria's GDP may drop below the estimate. And I was hoping to also see what our GDP per capita is. Still on the paper, IPOB threatens violence, alleges ethnic cleansing in Imo. Massive drop in enrollment threatens existence of unity schools. Opposition working for Tinubu's second term, Lukman alleges. Falana rallies NBA against illegal arrest, detention by police and others. Police arrest 97 suspects over Abuja attack. Huriwa urges prosecution. Osun confirms monkeypox activates emergency response. NARD begins warning strike, demands immediate rescue of kidnapped member. Details can be found on page 3. AMCON enlists international tracers to recover 5 trillion naira assets from debtors. Details can be found on page 15. And that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper.
First newspaper, starting with a big story, aged out. Will federal government use 18-year policy for WAEC, NECO boost or hinder education? This is a question which we hope to answer and get the answers as well from the federal government. Even world-best leaders will fail under Nigeria's current constitution. This is coming from Anyaku. As well, we have food prices surge over 200% in July 2024, says NBS report. Resident doctors commence 7-day warning strike. As well, we have Tinubu appoint Mohammed NIA DG, Ajayi DSS DG. NNPCL expand NLG supply to Japan and China. Also, we have Shiyi Tinubu presents at the CNG swearing in spark reaction. Detail found in the paper. Other stories still on the paper. Tinubu applaud Nigeria's GDP growth by 3.19% in the second quarter of 2024. Lukman is warning, saying Tinubu on track to become the worst, to becoming worse than Buhari. Tinubu on track to becoming worse than Buhari. We have a picture story where we can see the vice president together with the governor of Borno State and other dignitaries attending the funeral of Alhaji Ahmed Ali, Borno's late Commissioner of Finance and Economic Development, who died in his sleep on Monday. The ceremony took place in Maiduguri, joined by associates and family members. And that's all on First News newspaper.
On Leadership newspaper, Niger governor redeems 250 million naira pledge to Leadership Young Person of the Year. Abuja attack, police confirms arrest of 97 shites. Details can be found on page 4. The big story on the paper, insecurity, waves of change as Tinubu rejects NIA DSS. Mohammed replaced Rufai, Ajayi takes over from Bichi. Experts set agenda for new DGs. You can find details on page 4. Atiku Muazu Lamido paid tribute to Emir of Ningi. Professor emerges LG chairmanship candidate. Borno commissioner found dead in own room. Details can be found on page 15. On monkeypox, parasitologists seek increased awareness. Details can be found on page 7, and that's all the news on Leadership newspaper.
On the Blueprint newspaper, we're still looking at our GDP as a big story here, where we have Tinubu excited as GDP rises to 3.19% in the second quarter of 2024. Services sector drives non-oil growth, and then we have Okweleke identifies CBN rate hike, high petroleum product as reasons. More detail found in the paper. We increase passport fees to enhance quality and faster process. This is coming from the NIS, where we can find more detail on page 7, and we've been seeing that story since last week. More detail found on page 7. Still on Blueprint newspaper, why under 7 pupils can't take the WAEC and NECO exams, coming from the Minister of Education. He said it during an interview. You can do well to grab the paper for those who are hoping to write, and also for guardians and parents of words. Still on Blueprint newspaper, unclaimed dividend rises to 215 billion naira in March 2024. AFCON qualifiers, we have Ogoville may call up Oshime and Lukman. You can find detail of that story on page 32. NNPC Limited commences shipment of the LNG cargoes to Japan and China. And the issue of Kaduna, 8 months after colleague's abduction, we are having that Nigeria's resident doctors will begin a nationwide strike concerning that, and decision is leaving patients stranded at the UBTH. You can do well to get the paper and read more detail of that. Still on Blueprint newspaper, police confirm arrest of 97 shites over Abuja attack. Tinubu appoints new DG for NIA and SSS. 3 died of suspected diphtheria outbreak in Zaria. As well, soldiers kill suspected terrorists in Kaduna, recover arms. More detail found on page 9 of the Blueprint newspaper. We have a picture story where we can see some women employed to keep Kaduna metropolis clean barricaded Ahmadu Bello Way over alleged non-payment of their 8-month salary arrears by the Kaduna Capital Territory Authority in Kaduna State, and we can see them coming out to protest. The authority of Kaduna State will do something concerning these women. We have them everywhere, and that are being given this job, and it's only right that they are being paid their their salaries or their wages. More detail of that story can be found on the Blueprint, and that's all on Blueprint newspaper.
On Vanguard newspaper, CBN lifts ban on lending to banks, pegs interest rate at 31.75%. Global Union orders decry worsening rights abuse in Abuja. In Nigeria, you can find details on page 8. AMCON enlists international asset tracers to recover 5 trillion naira debt. Nigeria records 166,000 barrel per day below budget benchmark. A report details can be found on page 32. Tinubu appoints Mohammed as DG NIA, Ajayi DG DSS. The big story on the paper, outrage as federal government pegs age for writing WASCI at 18 years. The writer says it will draw back education coming from the teachers union. Will go to court. Statement from parents will respond later. WAEC is saying we want meeting of stakeholders. CONUA is saying where parents rushing their children. And why are parents rushing their children? A question ASU is asking. All the details can be found on page 5. Will implement state police, say Ondo, Rivers, Jigawa governors. Details can be found on page 40. Separate office of AGF from AGFG. PDP governors are saying. Flood kills 49 in Jigawa. Adama, Taraba displays thousands. Details can be found on page 15. Also a sports column on page 44, and that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
It's quite sad when we were talking about the issue of flooding yesterday.
Yes.
We were just hoping that there were no casualties when we saw that picture coming
True.
from Adama State. And it's quite unfortunate.
Yes.
This is the number we have. And I hope that the government of the state, each time we get a warning coming from all of these authorities that are saying vacate a particular place, I wonder why we always take all of these warnings lightly and look at what it has resulted. Like, I'm just trying to sympathize with the families that actually lost their life. It's either they were given the warning, but they refused to adhere to it, or their awareness did not get to them the fact that they needed to vacate, or they didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I think we all have to be very, very vigilant when it comes to the issue. It's still raining, and we know that according to them, the rain will continue August, September, hopefully maybe, who knows, till October, November as well. So I'm hoping that we should not be, very relaxed concerning the issue of flooding. We should take it very, very seriously.
Of course, and when there's a warning that has to do with vacating a certain area, I believe that the government needs to help. It's one thing for me to tell you, seller, to leave your house. It's another thing for me to give you where to go to. Yes, so that is the situation. I think that when it comes to things like flooding, it's not enough. It's not enough to tell the people to vacate. It's not enough. You have to give them where to vacate to. You have to create. You have to. It should even be a year ahead of time. It shouldn't be months too. Perhaps you have relatives you can move to neighboring village to accommodate you and all of that. There need to be ample amount of time for everybody to be able to prepare, stock up food, and move. Because when you're going elsewhere, you're not going to be a burden to anybody. I don't think this is a responsibility of the people who are expected to leave that place single-handedly. They're supposed to have support from the government and the agencies that are in charge of giving these warnings. You're supposed to help these people find another place. So when there's failure to do that, it is joint work. Few people would have moved because they could. What about those that don't have where to go to? So it's a collective effort. So we will keep seeing these kinds of casualties as long as you just keep the warning, give the warning rather, without helping these people find a safer place, because they also need to know that where they're going, there won't be flood and all of that. So unless we see this kind of synergy when it comes to work, I don't think a warning is good enough. It's not good enough. So far, so good. It has proven not to be good enough since we are still having this death toll.
Very true, very true. Well, we'll just keep our fingers crossed and hope that the government will do their own part by making sure to keep life safe. Let's take a look at another paper, which happens to be the Daily Times newspaper. Federal government revitalizing key economy sector to address challenges coming from the finance minister. The big story is still talking about our GDP growth. Tinubu assures stronger economic performance, with the writer says federal government will continue to work anxiously to rekindle Nigerians' hope and confidence. Appoint new Director General of the NIA and DSS. Appoint new Director General for NIA and DSS. Wandu NOAC deal followed due process, compile with PIA NUPRC replies Atiku, who recalled in the paper he was accusing why was Owando given giving the license to go ahead and operate while others have been pending. And here we're seeing the reason is because they follow the due process of everything needed. You can read detail on the front page and continue in the paper. CBN raises deposit rates to 25.75% for banks as SLF suspension ends. As well, coming from the NIS, they're saying we increase passport fees to enhance quality and faster process. We saw that they increased it last week, 50,000 for those who will be the 5-page for 5 years, and then I think for those who will be spending 10 years and above, which will be 100K. So you can read more detail of what that entails on page 12. Appeal Court voiced judgment faulting Edu PDP governorship primary. Downside of the paper, we have Bauchi Gombe Jigawa resident decry alleged diversion of federal government rights. We're still having more states complaining they are yet to get a palliative. And I think that the federal government needs to caution some of these governors. What is the delay? What is happening? We hope that we'll get answers to that. You can find that on page 4. We have a picture story. You can see a cross-section of Federal Road Safety Corps members, cops rather, during a refreshing course on representing the Federal Road Safety for enhanced services, delivering patrol and others. You can do well to get the paper and read more detail of any other story that is of interest to you.
On Daily Independent newspaper, federal government bars under 18 from writing WASCI NECO exams. OK's 8 varsities for Nigerian undergrads in Togo and Benin. CBN lifts ban on standard lending rate, pegs interest rate at 31.75%. Banks to earn 25.75% on deposits with Central Bank of Nigeria. The big story, year-end festivities. Despite odds, Nigerian airlines get more aircraft to delight travelers. Air Peace United set for additional 10 aircraft. Overland Airways, Ibom Air increase frequencies. You can start with the details on the front page. 3.2% GDP growth excites Tinubu. Analysts seek improvement in critical sectors. NNPC expands global footprint to Japan, China with LNG supply. On Edo, Guba Appeal Court nullifies ruling faulting PDP primaries. IOC's divestment, fresh updates emerge as Agip. Equinor get ministerial approvals. Oshun confirms 2 cases of monkeypox. Details can be found on page 7. Importers look to local dairy industry on back of rising FX rate. Tinubu appoint Mohammed DG, NIA Ajayi DG DSS. Details can be found on page 7, and that's all the news on Daily Independent newspaper.
Richard, I'm interested in this local dairy industry, where we're seeing that the fact that we've been importing milk is having a negative impact on this sector. And then you can actually tell that it still goes back to tell us what we have been talking about agriculture, which we say is it's beyond just talking about food or just talking about farmlands. We're talking about animal husbandry. We're talking about so many other things under the agriculture. And just imagine if we had enough cattle, and they're talking about healthy cattle. You can go around and see some of our cattle, and I don't know if the Nigerian government have a cattle farm, talking about belonging to the Nigerian government, where we have our milk being made here locally. We do import our milk. So I'm looking forward to seeing what will the government do about that. You see, the more we begin to read things, Rachel, just like we said, we are being exposed to some of the laxes we are having, things we are lacking, what we need to do. This is a sector under the agriculture, and I'm hoping that the government will really look into that. It's really so sad we can see that looking into that, so that we can actually do something concerning our forex and all of that. So I look forward to seeing this government doing something. We're seeing that most of our papers have been talking about our GDP, how we're going forward or backward. According to our papers, we recorded a very huge success in the second quarter of this year. But then how about till the end of the year? What success are we recording? Our Naira keeps going now. So I'm looking forward to seeing more local things being made here in the country, so that we can have growth as we should, as we're supposed to be expecting it to be.
So when I was in primary 4, our school went for an excursion, and I can't forget it, because to tell you how interesting that excursion was. And it was just to Farm Fresh here at VOM, where I think it's been called WAMCO that time. I can't remember the name though. But we went for an excursion because if we're talking about local dairy industry in the country, and we went for the excursion, and then we saw the different breeds of cattle that will be able to give us fresh milk and then quality yogurt or the milks that we have around. And I remember clearly, and I will never forget the names of the breeds. We have the Swiss and the Friesians. Now those are the big cows that you can milk and get gallons and liters of milk from them on daily basis. And then we had other local and breeds also of cows. I think there were the short ones, and then there were the big ones. I can't remember what those ones were called. But I can remember that because we went to the milking parlor, for example, and we saw how the cows were being milked like mechanically. They had different types of pumps, and you could see how much milk was gotten. And at that time they had maybe 20 of those. If I can't remember, there weren't much at those. Some were still babies, some were about to grow, and you could see the bulls that had been bred for meat. The size are different. These foreign breeds are short and fat, and I can imagine now they were able to keep their production just within Jos and the plateau for that number. It wasn't because I remember my dad always buying us fresh milk at that time, and not the powdered milk we get, like fresh liquid milk from that company and all of that. And just for me to go and see how it's been done and all of that is interesting. Now the question is the government ready to put in such investment for us to have more of that? Because we have to import these and foreign breed of cows. It is not our Turus and Indamas that is the local Fulani, Bororo and the red that can give us these kinds of milk. Of course, it has to be, because those cows are for that purpose and all of that. And then do we have the government, because there are many sectors. When we talk about agriculture, we've talked about how there's so much to it. I don't even think we are utilizing 10% of what agriculture can give to us when it comes to livestock farming. We have a government, they shouldn't take any of it, but we have a government that is more focused on nomad farming. That's why you will see them thinking of having ministry for Fulani and herdsmen and all of that, rather than looking at what kind of agricultural advancement are we going to adopt. Because if we want to take our agriculture to the industrial level, we are not supposed to only focus on herdsmen that are moving, because those ones are even food, and then it takes a longer period of time for you to have one cow to get to the level where it becomes meat. Exactly. While when you ranch, the cows get fattened for meat at a very short period of time. It is a very lucrative industry. We can look at the meat part, we can look at the dairy product part of it. Is the government ready to invest in that aspect of livestock rearing and farming in this country, that we will be able to have importers or local industries looking at local dairy products in the country and all of that? These are the questions to ask, because we need investment around all of these things for investors to be able to come and rely on the dairy product that is within the country. And because for some of these countries over the years, companies rather, for Farm Fresh precisely, is no longer like before anymore. The production has reduced. It's not like before. I know they ventured out into every other thing, but that fresh milk, I don't see it anymore. It's more than 10 years I've not seen. I don't even know if they still have it or anything. They still manage to do the yogurt, but it tells you that there is need for support coming from the government to boost these kinds of local dairy and producing farms, and also more investment to have more of it within the country before we'll be able to get there. So the question is still back to, do we have a government that is willing to look at other parts of agriculture that is dying, that has massive potential. Until they can answer us, I think we will just still be speculating and hoping to have investors come in, but still yet nothing put in place for them to actually come and thrive in the country.
Honestly, because you took that word right out of my mouth, the fact that it's a support coming from the federal government that is lacking. Just like you took the Farm Fresh, for example. So imagine if we have support, and then from the government, you could imagine the branches will be having of it all over the country, because we know how good their milk is. I mean, even back then in school, we had where the buckets of the fresh milk were being made for tea and all of that. And I can't, just like you said, I can't remember. The yogurt right now is even more expensive. Reason why? Because they're just like said, they are struggling, trying to make sure. And I'm just hoping that the federal government, they still produce the fresh milk. I mean, I still see people still buy the milk, but it's just not the point. I think it's just that they are still struggling. And I know there are still many other milk industry maybe we're not aware of, but I'm just hoping that the government will give support to all of these firms and all of these places, and then we'll begin to have our own milk production. Investors with other countries that are into it, of course, we'll not have the cows, we need to import them, but imagine when we have good investors, we have the cows, and then we do exchange of kind of a way, you know, we'll have better things happen. So we look forward to seeing all of that coming from our government. Well, let's look at another paper before we go on a break. We'll be looking at the Punch newspaper, where we have federal government jubilated as appeal court restore Agidado as a candidate. You can do well to read more detail of that on page 10. Claim I'm working for APC, PDP laughable, coming from Apata. Detail found on page 7. The big story on the paper, federal government to shun errand fuel station as petrol hit 1,000 naira per litre. Queues persist in NNPCL major marketer station as PMS shortage worsen. More detail found inside the paper. Still talking about the issue of the age for WAEC, ASU, NUT, DFAS, federal government ban under 18 candidacy. You can read more detail of that on page 2. We hope to discuss that hopefully later in the day. Kidnapped doctor, patients grown as NARD strike grounds hospital. Talking about our resident doctors going on strike. You can find detail on page 7. 136 Europe-bound African migrants rescued at Spanish port. More detail found on page 43. Every day we have more people trying to leave this country. No matter what it will take them, even if they would die at the cost of living, they prefer to leave. We hope we see something better going on. Still on the Punch newspaper, we have former Punch editor to present book on digital economy. ASU protests LASU members dismissal, brand VC enemy. You can read that on page 4 and 5. Nigerian first Olympic medalist Miyagu dies at 85. You can read that on page 45. And that's all of the Punch newspaper. But we'd love to take a break here so that we can let you go through the papers, drop your comment, your views on any of the stories that's of interest. And when we come back, we'll continue the paper review. Please stay tuned with us.
The gospel of Jesus Christ is our Heavenly Father's plan for the happiness and salvation of His children. Equa Television International shares the gospel of Jesus Christ because the world must come to the realization.
Welcome back. It's still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories from where we're seeing that resident doctors are beginning a 7-day warning strike, as well as the new age limit for WAEC, where we're seeing that the Nigerian Union of Teachers and ASU are having a different view concerning that age, whether what is the hidden agenda behind this new age. Already, the Ministry of Education have said that will be it starting from next year. And then we also have the issue of other stories as well on the papers, our GDP, how is growing in the second quarter of the year, and then we are hoping to see what it will look like before the end of the year. So these and many other stories, we would love you to also drop your views on any of the stories that is of interest to you. I still have Rachel with me. Thank you.
You're welcome, Sally.
All right, you take us through the next paper we have.
On Nigerian Tribune, Appeal Court reaffirms Igadalo as Edo PDP governorship candidate, says delegates lack locus to challenge primaries. Tinubu removes Bichi, appoints Ajayi as new DSS DG, names Ambassador Mohammed NIA head. Amotekun has come to stay in Ondo, Aidatiwa, saying Nigeria's GDP grows by 3.19% amidst oil production drop in the second quarter of 2024, a report from the NBS. UBA to host business series Build to Last for African founders entrepreneurs. The big story on the paper, the Patriot steps up move for new Nigeria constitution, sets up 17-man advocacy committee, killer heads team to begin consultation with National Assembly members and other stakeholders. And could speak to Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Sudan, and Canada. Reiterate why now is best time to have new constitution. You can find all the details on page 15. Resident doctors begin 7-day strike. Police arrest 11 as marksmen in NDLEA military uniform hijack multi-million naira tramadol in Lagos. Residents of Plateau, Zamfara, Niger mining communities live in fear over constant bandit attack. AMCON intensifies recovery effort and leads international asset tracers. Nigeria's divestment with Wando, Mobile, Eni, Agip, others in accordance with PIA. This is NUPRC saying. Details can be found on page 7, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On Metrics newspaper, Wando Agrip $783 million deal followed due process compiled with extra rules coming from the NUPRC. And concerning the transfer window for sport lovers, Napoli reduces Oshime's price to 70 million euros. Detail found on page 20. More details on the paper. NNPC Limited announced LNG shipment to Japan and China. CBN raises rates for standing deposit facility to control liquidity. And the change of guards at the NIA and DSS, Kwara Governor Hill's appointment says appointees great professionals. You can find that on page 3. On 2027, why it may be difficult to sack Tinubu coming from the ex-APC chieftain. Opposition leaders are unserious about wresting power from Tinubu. Atiku Obi Kwankwaso orders fighting survivor battle. Opposition leaders must develop alternative political platform by December 2024. So the outcome of 2027 will determine from this year. You can look up that story in the paper. Nigeria's economy grows by 3.19% in the second quarter of 2024, coming from the NBS. Nigerian police detained 97 shiites following deadly clash. Nigeria recognizes only 5 Benin universities, 3 in Togo, the rest illegal. This is coming from the Minister of Education. You can read which universities is legal, so you don't end up with a fake certificate. These are found in the paper. As well, we have other stories as well for entertainment. You can do a trade out on page 19. We have a picture story here talking about Renew Hope Initiative. You can see our First Lady with others during a project to accelerate birth registration in Nigeria, holding on Thursday, the 29th of August. So you can do a trade more detail of that in the paper. And that's all of Metrics newspaper.
On Voice of Liberty, Mohammed Ajayi emerged as new Director General of NIA and DSS. NBA conference, Tinubu reaffirms commitment to rule of law and tolerance. Dangote announces readiness to roll out petrol from refinery. The big story on the paper, it's on insecurity. No rest until Nigeria is safe. IGP Ebetokun is assuring us. The Inspector General of Police, Kayode Ebetokun, has pledged that the Nigerian police will not rest until the country is safe and secure for all its citizens and residents. Katsina to inject over 30 billion naira into agri sector. Replace humanitarian ministry with National Social Security Agency, WOCO tells Tinubu. No excuse for failure to halt crude oil theft, Okonjo-Iweala is saying. On hardship, Tinubu on track to becoming worse than Buhari. Dr. Lukman is making this statement, and that's all the news on Voice of Liberty.
All right, let's take a look at this day newspaper coming from the NUPRC. Owandu NAOC deal follow due process compile with extend rules, says NNPC Mobile Court sees delayed agreement, transaction undergoing due diligence. You can do well to read that story on page 10. CBN leave SLF suspension banks to earn up to 19 to 25.75% on deposits. We have concerning our GDP grows by 3.19% in the second quarter of this year. The big story, new spy chiefs trigger new expectations in nation security, where we have Mohammed replaces Abubakar as the DG, NIA Ajayi takes Bichi's place at the DSS. Tinubu changes new men to reposition agency, use experience to tackle security. You can read who said that and the reason for that statement. NNPC announces commencement of the LNG supply to Japan and China. We still have the picture story which we saw since yesterday of Wolabi historical visit to the North and South Poles. You can read that story on page 19. And that's all in this day newspaper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, appeal court voice judgment faulting Edo PDP governorship primary dismisses Ojizwa suits against Dalo. You can find details page 29. New vigor in security as Tinubu replaces DSS NIA leadership, appoints Ajayi, former director in Rivers, Bauchi, Kogi, Enugu to head intelligence agency, names Mohammed, ex-head of Libya mission, North Korea, Pakistan, Sudan, State House, Abuja as DG, International Intelligence Service. AMCON to unleash international asset tracer on loan defaulters. Patients groan as doctors begin nationwide strike over abducted member. Nigeria's GDP grew by 3.19% in the second quarter, higher than 2.51% in the second quarter of 2023, says NBS. Police confirms arrest of 97 Shiites over attack on officers in Abuja. IGP condoles families of slain officers, orders manhunt for killers. Why economic challenge persists in Africa by Ghana ex-president. Price of cooking gas rises to 17,000 naira. Price of 20 empty tons hits 22.262 million naira. Buhari Tinubu have betrayed Nigeria's trust, statement from APC's chieftain, and then a picture where we can see Vice President Kashim Shettima with Director General World Trade Organization Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala during 2024 Annual General Conference of the Nigeria Bar Association in Lagos. This happened yesterday, and that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, Nigeria's GDP grows by 3.19% in the second quarter of 2024, coming from the NBS, saying the ICT contribution to Nigerians' real GDP hit 19.78%. As well, we're having as health sector grows by 2.41%, detail found on page 7. Still on Nigerian News Direct, Okonjo-Iweala calls for stable economic policies to revive the Nigerian's GDP. Federal government notifies over 22,700 degrees from fake Togo, Benin Republic varsities. You can read detail of that on page 5. NNPC Limited begins export of the LNG to China and Japan. Wandu Agri $783 million deal followed due process. This is coming from the NUPRC, fires back at Atiku for his accusation. As well, the President Tinubu have appointed new NIA and DSS DG. You can read who they are and their portfolio on page 3, and that's all on Nigerian News Direct.
On New Telegraph, the big story, capital flight, how multinational firms bleed Nigeria via systemic offshore payment. an ongoing investigation. Details can be found on page 3. Man optimistic as GDP rises by 3.19%. Standing facilities, CBN leaves suspension on lending to banks. Poverty in Africa not an act of God, statement from former President Obasanjo. Abuja clash, police arrest 97 shites, IGP orders search for others. Landing cost of diesel drops to 1,117 naira to a litre. Aviation fell to 1,086 naira per litre. Borno Finance Commissioner Ahmed Ali found dead in his room. Federal government to enforce 18-year age limit for WASCI and NECO. Resident doctors embark on warning strike over abduction of member. Details can be found on page 2 and 26. Divergent interest, presidency emboldened by failed opposition. On Labour Party crisis, Abure planning another convention. Still on the paper, latest report on declining inflation, growing GDP indicate economy on right trajectory. Statement from President Tinubu. NBA confab coup denial of freedom, Apabio tells lawyers. More details can be found on page 4 and 5. Artificial sweetener tied to blood clots, a study that you can find the details on page 26. And then we have a picture story. We can see AMCON enlists international trackers to recover offshore assets. This is concerning international debt. You can find details on page 8, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper which we would love to look at, which is the Daily News Hub newspaper. And on the Daily News Hub newspaper, we are having slay officers, which is a big story. Police arrest 97 shites, launch manhunt for sex sponsors. Declare IMN members have murdered peace. You can read detail of that in the paper. As well, we have Ondo Guba Appeal Court affirms Agudado's nomination as PDP candidate, dismisses Ojezwa appeal for lacking merit. Tinubu may become worse than Buhari, says the ex-APC Vice Chairman Lukman. Sheyi Tinubu's presence at the NGN swearing-in sparked reactions. You can do out read detail of that. Flood destroys 14,940 houses in Sokoto. You can read in the paper. Borno Finance Commissioner dies inside his room. And we have pandemonium at Wase Market, Abuja, day after police and shites clash. You can find detail of that. Federal government prohibits under 18 candidates from taking WAEC and NECO. As well, we have tension as armed men kill Lagos monarch's son. Detail found in the paper. We have a picture story here. You can do well to get the paper in more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On the Nation newspaper, GDP surge points to an economy on right path. NBS linked growth to industry and service sectors. I made 7 million naira in 1 year growing tomatoes. You might want to find details of this story on page 2. Under 18 pupils barred from writing WAEC and NECO exams, while Southeast students are yet to benefit from federal government loans. Ajayi replaces Bichi as DSS DG. Mohammed takes over at NIA. Nigeria's first individual Olympic medalist Mayegun dies at 83. Still on the paper, 97 held for killing of 2 policemen in Abuja attack. Accelerated stabilization advancement economic plan takes off. You can start with the details on the front page. AMCON eyes global assets of major bad debtors. Details can be found on page 7. 2 monkeypox cases in Oshun, and that's all news on the Nation newspaper.
Alright, let's take a look at Business Day newspaper, where we have stock deals jump 44% on banks recapitalization. Data found in the paper. We have Fed rate cut seen giving battered naira breather. You can read detail on page 31. AMCON intensify assets recovery and lease international trades. You can read that on page 3. We have the countdown to Port Harcourt refinery opening, which we have 5 days to go. More detail can be found in the paper. You can do well to read other stories, and that's all on Business Day newspaper.
On Sporting Sun newspaper, Kane to receive European Golden Shoe today. Mikel Obi replies Jackson says, I will shut up if you start scoring. We have Guardiola unhappy with Grealish on bench. Slot becomes first Liverpool coach to win 2 opening games. Details can be found on page 2. Former England manager Sven Goran Eriksson dies at 76. You can find details at the back page. And we have Jesus returns after September international break. Al Hilal pushing for £60 million Cancelo. And we have Hendrick makes history with goal on Real debut. You can find details on page 3. The big story, Napoli lowers Osimhen's price to €75 million as Chelsea restart talk to sign Nigeria amid Al Ali links. More details can be found on page 6. Palace jumps into battle for Nketiah. Ndidi Iwobi speak ahead of 2025 AFCON qualifiers against Benin and Rwanda. Ancelotti fires warning to Vinicius Jr. Chelsea considering Man United swap deal for Sancho. You can find details inside the paper. Fury names Wilder as the hardest puncher. I was wobbled. Details can be found at the back page. And that's all news on Sporting Sun newspaper.
Well, this is how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you to our viewers. Thank you to our supporters. Thank you to the entire crew as well. Thank you to you, Rachel, for doing this with me. Until we come your way again tomorrow, do have a wonderful day ahead.